Ancient Greece, the geography. In our class today, we're going to have a look at how Greece's geography and its nearness to the sea strongly influenced the development of trade and the growth of city-states. So that's a really big idea, no? Our idea of geography, which we have seen in other civilizations before, how geography influenced the growth, their economy, and their way of life. So, tying in with that, we're going to see how Greece's geography uh, helped shape early Greek civilization. So that's our very first idea. Then our second idea is how later on this same geography helped Greeks create city-states, and how the geography influenced the creation of city-states, basically for their protection and security. So let's go with our first main idea. Let's have a look at our map of Greece. Here we can see Greece here, which is a peninsula. Yeah, about 2,800 years ago, there lived a civilization of people called the ancient Greeks. Today we call part of the area where this ancient civilization lived the country of Greece. Long ago, however, the ancient Greeks lived on a much larger area of land. The boundaries of ancient Greece spread widely to the east and into many areas bordering the Black Sea on the north, and hundreds of islands in the Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea. In fact, the civilization spread so much that expeditions by land and by ships allowed the Greeks to travel as far west as present-day Britain and as far east as India. The ancient Greeks traveled to explore far-off lands and also to trade or buy and sell goods with people from other areas. As I said at the beginning, the ancient Greeks were similar to other civilizations in many ways, and the geography had in fact influenced a lot in earlier civilizations that we had seen. Most civilizations, as we've seen, have had writing systems. They've had leaders and laws and religions, and the society is divided into different people doing different jobs. And the fall of these civilizations, the Egyptians, for example, the Mesopotamians, the Indians, the Chinese, the Mayan, Inca, Aztec, and Greeks. They all discovered ways to design and build magnificent structures that can still be seen today. So let's go back to our geography. As we can see from the picture, the geography of Greece is quite mountainous. In fact, Greece is a land of very high rugged mountains, and in many parts farming for the ancient Greeks was a struggle. Rugged, in this case, rugged mountains means very rough and uneven. So with a very rough and uneven landscape, it's very, very difficult to actually farm. In fact, it's very difficult to farm on very high sloping surfaces, as we can see here. In addition to being farmers, some Greeks were also shepherds who took care of sheep on this very rugged land. Besides having mountains, we said that Greece is a peninsula, and some Greeks built harbors near the Black Aegean and Mediterranean seas, and many became very expert sailors and fishermen, using boats like the one here in the image. The largest island in the Mediterranean was still known today as Crete. Because they were surrounded by water, the ancient Greeks on the island of Crete became especially skilled seafarers, a name for people who earn a living by working at sea, such as fishermen and sailors. The high mountains. Well, here we can see Crete down here. This is the biggest island. Yeah. Well, as I said, the high mountains also made a difference in the way ancient Greece was ruled. Because the mountains split Greece into lots of little valleys, it was very, very difficult to move from one place to the other. Yeah. Here, if we can do a zoom, yeah, we can actually see here is a river, another one. But we can actually see how difficult, how very, very, very little land there is. Most of the land is very mountainous, as we've seen. And here we have the Pindus Mountains, which runs right through the middle of Greece. That actually in some way blocks the east coast from the west coast, the Aegean Sea from the Ionian Sea. Okay, so we've seen how these very high mountains actually made it very, very difficult for Greeks to travel. Well, here we have a picture of the mountains. Yeah, you can see that they're quite dry, no? And in some cases very, very high. Okay, so what happened because of the mountains? Because of the mountains, um, little villages began spreading up all over. So let's have a look at these. Some of the villages actually developed and became what we call city-states. Now, many Greeks, because of the valleys, stayed in one place and never actually moved from one place to the other, and even married people from the same community. Each little city or village in each valley became its own little nation. So we have Athens was a nation, Sparta was a nation, and Corinth, for example, was another nation. These nations we refer today as city-states. Okay, here we have some of the main city-states at the time. So here we have Athens, which we'll be looking at later a lot closer, and Sparta. Sparta has been very famous lately due to cinema. Also we have Olympia here, Corinth, Delphi, and Knossos. But as we go through the course, you will see how other city-states or colonies began to spread and develop. So, as I said, each city-state had its own government and its own laws, which controlled the surrounding area. All the Greek city-states shared the same language. They all spoke Greek, or some form of Greek that we know today. Although each city-state would have its own dialect, or maybe slightly different vocabulary, or different ways of speaking, they were all Greeks. But they never considered themselves as, they wouldn't say they were a Greek. I would have said, if I was from Athens, I was Athenian. If I was from Sparta, I was a Spartan, and so on, even though we were all Greek. Okay, let's just go back to this map. So here we can see some of the other civilizations that we've seen. Yeah. So the ancient Greeks looked at the world around them very different from the way the other people we have seen before. No, we've had a look at the Indus Valley, we've had a look at Mesopotamia, the Nile, China. Some of you may have seen about the Incas and the Mayans and the Aztecs. But the Greeks actually looked at how society was organized in a very different way from other people at that time. So, for example, later on you're going to hear the story of how one city-state decided not to have a king anymore. For example, here in Peru we have our Inca, and it was the Inca. No, it was very, very different from the Greek civilization. The Inca would have been considered a king. So, each city-state, as we said, had its own government and its own laws. Here we can see three different forms of government. Yeah, some city-states were ruled by monarchs. Yeah, where it was just one man who ruled everyone, one man who made all of the decisions. Other city-states were ruled by oligarchy, which means that there was a few citizens who were responsible and who made all of the decisions for the rest of the people. These people, these oligarchs, could have been voted in, could have been elected, but in many cases they weren't. In many cases it was passed on from generation to generation. It was hereditary. And finally, we have democracy. Some city-states, in particular Athens, was ruled by democracy, where every free man could vote. So, what have we seen today? We've seen how geography influenced how cities developed in Greece. We've seen how it influenced their trade, the way they work, how they lived off the sea, their farming, and especially how the mountains divided each city-state. So, in our next class, we're going to have a look at how democracy, which is very important for us today in our society. This is something very much we have inherited from the Greeks. The idea of democracy, the idea of everyone making decisions for the rest of us. So that's all for today for our class. So until the next time, bye.